Welcome to Movie Reviews to Fall Asleep To. I am your host. Please remember to like or subscribe as it really helps the channel. Today we are tackling a giant. Not just any giant, a 112-foot tall marshmallow giant. In June of 1984, the cinematic landscape changed forever. We saw the release of a film that shouldn't have worked. It was a high-concept sci-fi, a gritty New York comedy, a horror flick, and a massive special effects blockbuster all rolled into one. I am, of course, talking about Ghostbusters. Today, we're going behind the scenes of the Ecto-1. We'll talk about the script that was originally set in outer space, the tragic loss of a comedy legend that almost tanked the project, the legal battles over that iconic theme song, and why this movie is secretly a manifesto for 1980s Reaganomics. Grab your proton packs. We're going in. Chapter 1. The script development, from outer space to 55th Street. To understand Ghostbusters, you have to understand the mind of Dan Aykroyd. Dan isn't just a comedian. He's a true believer. His family has a long, documented history with spiritualism. His great-grandfather was a mystic, and his father wrote a history of ghosts. Dan grew up in a house where seances and poltergeists weren't just movie tropes. They were family dinner conversations. In the early 80s, Aykroyd sat down to write what he called Ghost Mashers. But if you think the movie we got was wild, the original script was pure insanity. The original vision. Aykroyd's first draft was set in a dystopian future. The Ghostbusters weren't three guys in a basement. They were a group of interdimensional SWAT teams who traveled through time and space to fight massive Godzilla-sized ghosts. There were dozens of teams, multiple Stay Puft style monsters, and the Ecto-1 could fly. Aykroyd wrote this specifically as a vehicle for himself and his best friend, John Belushi. They had just come off the massive success of the Blues Brothers, and Dan envisioned them as the ultimate paranormal duo. The challenges. The first major challenge was the reality of physics and finance. Aykroyd took the script to director Ivan Reitman. Reitman read it and essentially told Dan that if they filmed it as written, it would cost $300 million in 1984 money. For context, that would be nearly $1 billion today. Reitman gave Dan the best advice of his career. Keep the ghosts, but put them in New York City. Make it about guys starting a small business. But then, tragedy struck. On March 5th, 1982, John Belushi passed away. Aykroyd was devastated. He was literally in the middle of writing a line for Belushi's character when he got the news. For a while, the script was shelved. It felt like the heart of the project was gone. The ghostwriting retreat. Eventually, Dan realized the idea was too good to die. He brought in Harold Ramis. In May 1982, the two of them retreated to Martha's Vineyard. They spent 3 weeks in a basement bomb shelter, rewriting the script. Ramis was the grounded one. He took Dan's wild, cosmic ideas and turned them into the dry, scientific dialogue we love. Trivia note. The Slimer character was never named in the script. The crew internally called him the Onion Head Ghost, but they privately referred to him as the ghost of John Belushi, a tribute to their late friend's voracious appetite and party-hard energy. 800 number you called to leave a message. He only agreed to do Ghostbusters if Columbia Pictures agreed to finance his passion project, a remake of The Razor's Edge. Winston Zeddemore. In the original script, Winston was the smart one. He was supposed to join the team much earlier and have a huge backstory. The role was written for Eddie Murphy. However, Murphy chose to do Beverly Hills Cop instead. When Murphy dropped out, The role was significantly trimmed down, which is why Ernie Hudson's character doesn't appear until halfway through the film. Louis Tully. This role was written for John Candy. Candy, however, wanted the character to have a thick German accent and 2 large dogs. Reitman felt that didn't fit, so Candy walked away. Rick Moranis stepped in and improvised almost all of his legendary lines, including the entire party scene monologue, where he's explaining tax law to his guests. The producers Hustle, Bernie Brillstein, and Ivan Reitman had a mountain to climb. They pitched the movie to Frank Price at Columbia Pictures. Price loved the idea, but he gave them a nearly impossible ultimatum. You have $25 million and you have to have it in theaters by June 1984. This was in the summer of 1983. They had less than a year to build the tech, film the movie, and finish the special effects. At the time, no movie with that many effects had ever been completed that quickly. Chapter 3. The Making of Controlled Chaos. Filming began in October 1983, and it was a race against time. The production was a mix of high-tech ingenuity and we hope this doesn't explode luck. The New York grind. They filmed on location in NYC for a few weeks before moving to Los Angeles. New York in the early 80s was gritty, loud, and uncooperative. The crew didn't always have permits for what they were doing. The famous scene where the Ghostbusters are running through the streets was often shot guerrilla style. They'd hop out of a van, run a block with the cameras rolling, and hop back in before the police noticed. Bill Murray would often wander off into actual New York crowds, staying in character and talking to confused tourists. The FX challenges, because they were on such a tight schedule, the special effects team, led by Richard Edlund, had to invent new ways of doing things. The proton streams, these were hand animated. They weren't CGI, CG. I didn't really exist in that capacity yet. Every single frame of the beams was drawn by hand over the film. The Marshmallow Man. This was a man in a suit, Tommy Fisher. They built a miniature set of Central Park West. The suit was made of foam latex and was incredibly hot and dangerous to wear. The marshmallow goo that explodes at the end. There was 50 gallons of shaving cream. It actually knocked a distracted extra to the ground because it was so heavy. The Terror Dogs. These were a mix of stop-motion animation and practical puppets. If you look closely at the scene where the dog is chasing Rick Moranis, you can see the limitations of the time, but the uncanny movement actually made it scarier. Chapter 4. Release and Reception. A Summer Juggernaut. Ghostbusters opened on June 8, 1984. It went up against Gremlins, which opened on the exact same day. It was a battle of the horror comedies. Box office magic Ghostbusters didn't just win, it dominated. It stayed at number 1 for 7 consecutive weeks. It eventually earned $229 million in its initial run, making it the highest-grossing comedy of all time, until Home Alone came along years later. When you adjust for inflation, the 1984 performance of Ghostbusters is equivalent to over $600 million today. It was a genuine cultural phenomenon. People were lining up around the block wearing homemade jumpsuits. At the time, critics were surprisingly positive for a genre film. Roger Ebert gave it 3.5 stars, calling it a rare movie that successfully joined special effects with comedy. Janet Maslin of the New York Times praised Bill Murray's deadpan delivery, noting that his attitude was the glue that held the spectacle together. However, not everyone was a fan. Some critics felt the special effects overwhelmed the jokes, but the public clearly disagreed. Chapter 5. The soundtrack. I Ain't Afraid of No Ghost. You cannot talk about Ghostbusters without talking about the song. Ray Parker Jr. was given a nearly impossible task. Write a theme song for a movie called Ghostbusters. How do you make that word rhyme? How do you make it cool? The producers originally wanted Huey Lewis and the News to write the theme. They declined. When Ray Parker Jr. turned in his track, it was a massive hit. But Huey Lewis noticed something. The bass line and structure sounded remarkably similar to his song I Want a New Drug. Lewis sued Columbia Pictures. They settled out of court, and a confidentiality agreement was signed. However, in 2001, Lewis talked about it on VH1's Behind the Music, which prompted Ray Parker Jr. to sue him for breaching the confidentiality agreement. It was a ghost hunt of legal proportions. The iconic "Who You Gonna Call" shout wasn't performed by professional singers. Ray Parker Jr. couldn't find anyone at the last minute, so he gathered a group of friends and family, including his girlfriend, to shout the lines in the studio. Chapter 6. Cultural Impact. Why it still matters. Why are we still talking about this movie in 2026? Why did it spawn sequels, cartoons, reboots, and a multi-billion-dollar franchise? There is a fascinating academic reading of Ghostbusters as the ultimate pro-capitalist film. Think about the plot. 1. Scientists are fired from a state-funded university, the government. 2. They enter the private sector and create a small business. 3. They are immediately harassed by a bureaucratic EPA agent, Walter Peck, who represents government overreach. 4. The government's interference actually causes the disaster, opening the containment unit. 5. The private sector, the Ghostbusters, has to save the world while being paid for it. In 1984, during the height of the Reagan era, this message of entrepreneurial heroism resonated deeply with the American public. Hymns of friendship. Beyond the politics, it's a movie about friendship. These are guys who are losers in every other part of their lives, but together they are heroes. It's a blue-collar movie. They wear jumpsuits, they drive a beat-up car, and they worry about their mortgage. That grounded reality makes the supernatural elements even more effective. Chapter 7. The Review. Does it hold up? Looking at Ghostbusters today, 40-plus years later, is a fascinating experience. In 1984, the horror comedy was a difficult tightrope. If it was too scary, kids wouldn't go. If it was too funny, the stakes wouldn't matter. Ghostbusters found the Goldilocks zone. It treats the ghosts as a legitimate threat. When the library ghost transforms in the opening scene, it's actually terrifying. Because the movie takes the threat seriously, the jokes feel like a necessary release of tension. It holds up today remarkably well. While some of the optical effects, like the matte lines around the terror dogs, look a bit dated in 4K, the practical sets and the lived-in feel of the firehouse are timeless. The pacing is also incredible. Modern blockbusters tend to be 150 minutes long and bloated with CGI. Ghostbusters is a lean 105 minutes. It moves like a freight train. The Bill Murray style of comedy, the detached, ironic hero, has been copied 1,000 times since, most notably in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it was never done better than it was here. Final Score Ghostbusters isn't just a movie. It's a time capsule of a decade that was obsessed with both the future and the supernatural. It's funny, it's smart, and it has a heart of pure ectoplasm. My score, 92 out of 100, host. That's all for tonight. Thanks for listening. Please like or subscribe to the channel.